Metallica's Ride the Lightning is 40 years old, and to many, it's the best album Metallica ever made. From the crowd-energizing breakdown and creeping death to the daunting opener of For Whom the Bell Tolls, it's a masterpiece, and a massive part of that genius can be credited to the late great Cliff Burton. With Cliff's passing in 1986, a piece of Metallica would fade to black along with it, and a lot of the way James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, and Kirk Hammett write their music still borrows a lot from lessons and techniques passed on to them by Cliff himself. Metallica has recently released an online tribute exhibit for fans of the monolithic Titans, offering an inside look and deeper connection to Cliff and the unyielding legacy he managed to build during his short 3-year tenure with the band, and is available digitally as part of Metallica's Black Box Museum, featuring sit-downs with artists reminiscing about their experience with and influence granted by the late legend, and the Burton family was involved in the project, so if you're looking to learn and pay respects to one of the best, check it out. Few acts in music and arts can lay claim to a legacy of domination in quite the same way that Iron Maiden did. From the beginning, they took the blueprint of heavy metal and gave it its identity, and in the process, gathered masses and melted faces. And while you can grab onto any era of the band's run or Eddie the Head's appearances on iconic album covers, Number of the Beast is likely to be one of the first to come to mind, in large part due to vocalist Bruce Dickinson's unleaded power. Bruce has been a prolific force in heavy metal for decades, and in his personal life, he strived to reach for the sky, becoming a commercial pilot with quite a bit of experience. And in the past, Dickinson has helmed the cockpit for Iron Maiden with the band's personal presidential airliner dubbed Ed Force One, a converted charter plane that was named by fans of the band via an online contest. He stopped flying it in 2022, but his effort to be more than just one of the greatest frontmen in metal history really has me feeling like a lazy loser. How about you? What's the most important record company in heavy metal history? Well, plenty come to mind depending on which era of metal's evolution you focus on. An argument could easily be made that Brian Slagel and Metal Blade Records top any list in terms of impact. From debuting metal's biggest act with Metallica's appearance on his Metal Massacre compilation to swiping up Cannibal Corpse barely a year after they began to dominate New York State, Slagel and Metal Blade have helped build the careers of some of the biggest names in the game. If you're in Las Vegas and want to look at some truly historic heavy metal memorabilia, you should stop by the Metal Blade Museum, showing off everything from original demo tapes, pressings, and t-shirts to some of the most important gear to grace tape. It looks like it would seriously stun and awe anyone who understands the importance of the items they're being blessed with viewing. To this day, Metal Blade continues to deliver heavy metal in all of its glory, and we owe a lot to one Brian Slagel. Metallica's James Hetfield sits atop the mountain as one of the most powerful frontmen in hard rock and heavy metal. He's conquered all in the realm of heavy metal and has been commanding crowds and stages for decades as the captain of the genre's biggest band. In more recent years, he's set off to take a crack at other hobbies and businesses like whiskey or cigars, and has even been recruited to provide a voiceover for a bear hunting documentary that got the band in some hot water. His most recent venture outside of heavy metal sees Hetfield busting out his acting chops, playing a lawman in an upcoming Western thriller titled The Thicket. And it's not his first time venturing onto the silver screen as a cop either, with him having a small part in a 2019 film titled Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile, a Netflix thriller biopic about Ted Bundy, with him getting the honor of arresting the country's most infamous. It's exciting to see these larger-than-life figures keeping that creative drive going with new projects, and I'm sure it'll be worth the watch when it comes out. The Foo Fighter Song's so bad that even Dave Grohl hates it. Alternative rock would dominate the 1990s, pushing other guitar-driven genres around like Kids in the Schoolyard, and one of the biggest acts to emerge from this rock and roll renaissance would be Dave Grohl and his Foo Fighters project. To this day, they're producing rock music classics like My Hero, All My Life, and The Pretender, appearing everywhere from social media to what's left of classic radio stations. But even among his sea of heavy-hitting tracks, one of Dave Grohl's least favorite songs was their mega hit Learn to Fly. It would be accompanied by one of the band's most iconic music videos featuring the likes of Jack Black and Kyle Gass, or Tenacious D if we're being formal, and it would be this song specifically that Grohl cited as the record's low point after releasing There Is Nothing Left to Lose, which, in contrast, is one of Dave's favorite records. His songwriting ability hit its stride with this album, and according to him, it was such a departure from expectation that he can't help but put it at the top. I'm sure plenty of you will give me your least favorite Foo Fighter songs in the comments. No More Tears is Ozzy's last classic record. at least in my opinion. Beyond the killer track list featuring Zakk Wylde's best solos and the heavy hand in writing from Motorhead's Lemmy Kilmister, it includes Ozzy's most recognizable ballad, Mama, I'm Coming Home. Now, I'm not sure what the worst thing you've done to a significant other is, but Ozzy, in a chemical psychosis, attempted to compromise to a permanent end his wife and manager Sharon. The song was written as one of the most extravagant attempts at repenting I've ever seen, and was a massive hit for Osbourne, further elevating an album that is one of mainstream metal's most iconic. Decades later, Ozzy and Sharon are still together, having blazed a path with historic tours like Ozfest and a reality TV show in the genre's early days. Now that I think about it, statistically there are at least a few of you who have attempted to end your spouse. Metallica's And Justice for All was their triumphant return after the bus accident that claimed Cliff Burton just a couple of years prior. Producer Flemming Rasmussen, who lent a golden hand to Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets, was brought in once again, but his involvement came far too late to avoid the inevitable. While the track list is killer and it's one of my favorite albums, Rasmussen expressed anger at the lack of bass guitar and it would spark decades of clamoring for justice for Cliff's successor, Jason Newsted. Theories about ego and heartache leading to Lars Ulrich and James Hetfield burying his parts down low in the mix have swirled for years, and the band themselves have touched upon it on a few occasions. Metallica's legendary pre-Black Album producer has said in interviews that Newsted was not only a member, but a fan of Metallica, which for some twisted reason drove Ulrich and Hetfield crazy. But Jason was a trooper and was Metallica's secret weapon live for his decade-plus run with the band, and his underutilization in the studio is one of metal's most egregious sins. Eddie Van Halen has some of the most recognizable guitars in rock history. From his signature 3-color Frankenstrat to his Van Halen 2 Bumblebee that's buried with Dimebag Darrell, he was a mechanically minded genius and has tweaked and tinkered with every guitar he's ever used. Digging a little deeper into his arsenal, his Canadian flag Music Man guitar is one that has gone completely unseen for nearly 30 years, but has recently resurfaced after being put up for auction, allowing collectors to own a piece of history that I'm sure is going to run them a pretty penny. Music Man would win out in a battle for collaboration in the early 90s with the rock legend, and they would go on to produce Eddie's first official signature guitar. This particular guitar would be one that was originally purple, but was overhauled as Van Halen was set to take part in a Canada Day celebration event in 1993. A lot of gear has passed through the hands of this guitar god, and the more I learn about Eddie, the more I understand the impact he had on the world. The Beastie Boys were the American heroes that fought for your right to party. But before they went on to help bring hip-hop to a mainstream audience, they were a small punk rock outfit back in the genre's golden age. Plenty of rock and roll can be felt in their work, with one of the best examples being their classic No Sleep Till Brooklyn, with its title being inspired by Motorhead and its guitar solo being helmed by a legend. During the recording of License to Ill, iconic producer Rick Rubin would bring together MCA, Mike D, and Ad-Rock with thrash metal pioneer Slayer, recruiting guitarist Kerry King to lay down the track's melting guitar solo and appear in the music video in a gorilla suit. According to Rubin, King and the boys didn't really get along, but their collaboration would bring Slayer's sound to a mainstream audience before the band would break through themselves. License to Ill would go on to be one of the decade's best records, regardless of how you feel about hip-hop, and would be another example of the 80s looking to mesh together heavy metal with other sounds in a bid to pioneer a new front. 1991 saw Metallica go from 80s thrash metal headbangers to a mainstream heavy metal force to be reckoned with, to the delight and dismay of millions of fans to this day, with their self-titled release fondly and firmly referred to as the Black Album. Since its release, people have screamed sellout as the band would graduate from small stages to arenas with mega hits like Enter Sandman, The Unforgiven, and Sad But True. And if you're evaluating with any objective metrics, it's one of metal's best albums without even being one of Metallica's best albums. It would break out onto the Billboard 200 chart, back when that was a big deal, and to this day has failed to leave that chart, recently crossing its 750th week on the previously iconic review metric. The Black Album would prove to be the start of a major departure from the thrash metal genre that Metallica helped guide through the 80s, leading to what many regard as the band selling out their values for money, but in my opinion, it's all just headbanger gatekeeping and has no home with yours truly. When it comes to heavy metal, Black Sabbath and Iron Maiden are arguably the two most influential to not only its evolution, but its existence as a whole. When Ozzy was axed from Sabbath in 1979, he surrounded himself with great musicians and a powerful wife/manager in Sharon Osbourne, and set off on an iconic solo career right alongside bands like Iron Maiden. When the Osbournes launched Ozfest, they took over the touring festival scene and platformed tons of bands, however corporate or pay-to-play as it was. And when Maiden co-headlined 2005's run of shows, remarks made by vocalist Bruce Dickinson would trigger Sharon and Ozzy to sabotage the band's final set in California at the end of the tour. It would be one of the era's more notorious scandals, and the he said, she said of it all would be ripe for a budding internet and continuing metal scene, exposing a petty side to the Osbournes that went far beyond an end-of-tour prank. But to have Iron Maiden and the post-reality TV Osbournes going at one another is at least pretty entertaining.